but it's curiosity as to where we are, what we are. It's very much more exciting to discover we're on a ball, half of it sticking upside down. It's spinning around in space. It's a mysterious force which holds us on. It's going around a great big glob of gas that's burning fueled by a fire that's completely different than any fire we can make. Well, now we can make that fire, nuclear fire. No, but that's a much more exciting story to many people than the tales which other people used to make up who worried about the universe, that we were living on the back of a turtle or something like that. They were wonderful stories, but the truth is so much more remarkable. And so what's the pleasure in physics is that, to me, is that as it's revealed, the truth is so remarkable, so amazing. And I have this disease, and many other people who have studied far enough to begin to understand a little of how things work are fascinated by it. And this fascination drives them on to such an extent that they've been able to convince governments and so on to keep supporting them in this investigation that the race is making into its own environment.
Astronauts aren't trained how to swallow their saliva in space?
There it is. Check it out, guys. That is so exciting. Incredible.
Hello my friends, I'm Kyle Thompson. This is Research Flat Earth. And as always, welcome back.
Boys and girls, welcome back. This is really just a bridging episode because I'm not quite decided on how things look out at what is generally called the South Pole. I introduced you to the planisphere back in episode 12, and really it's a map of the stars in the sky. It's got a ground mask that shows the limits of your horizon. So, although the sky is quite big, 196 million square miles, you can't see all of it. And the parts of it that are in daylight, you also can't see. So what the ground mask does really is it helps you to narrow down how much of the sky you can see, and you can give some sense of how big the individual constellations are. Many of us, if you go and look up constellations in books, they're shown to you in isolation. They don't really give you any sense of scale of how big the constellations are. So it can be a bit daunting when you go outside and have a look at the sky and try and find your way around. When I kicked off with the glow-in-the-dark planisphere, and the reason I did the glow-in-the-dark planisphere is because I can pull the whole sky map off, the ground mask off, and you can see the entire sky. And this particular one goes from the North Pole all the way out to 60 degrees south, which is just inside the Antarctic Circle. So it was a good model to work with, but it's got its limitations. It's the one that, while it being luminous, it seems like a good idea for when you're out at night looking at the stars. It makes the ground mask window look very busy, and sometimes it can be quite hard to find your way around things. But worse than that is it chops off the last 30 degrees of the sky around the edge. It was a constant source of annoyance. And what I was surprised about is I got the usual objections from people about what directions the stars go. People telling me that the southern hemisphere stars go in a different direction to the southern hemisphere stars. So I did what any sensible person would do. I went out and bought one for the southern hemisphere. So what you've got here is two planispheres, one for the northern hemisphere and one for the southern hemisphere. And I did actually put these up the first time I introduced them. and kind of hoped that people would look when I said that we seem to be looking at the same sky. On first glance, they look fairly innocuous. They look like they're both showing one side of a ball. One's showing the top, the other one is showing the bottom. Look at the window on the ground mask. One of the more noticeable things is that the window for the southern hemisphere is much bigger than the window for the northern hemisphere. It claims to cover the same sized area. So unless people in the southern hemisphere have a magical sight and they can see, I worked it out about 1,200 miles, they can see 1,200 miles further than people in the northern hemisphere, there's something wrong with this. But if you look a bit closer, you'll also notice that the months on the northern hemisphere, the one on the left, the months on the northern hemisphere go clockwise around the year. The ones on the southern hemisphere go anti-clockwise. So if I take any date and stars at midnight, as the night goes along by the hour, you're going to see the northern hemisphere stars will go anti-clockwise for this, and the southern hemisphere will go clockwise. But take a closer look. The western hemisphere and the eastern hemisphere, look at where they are. On the northern hemisphere, the western horizon is on the left and the eastern horizon is on the right. Whereas on the southern planisphere, the eastern horizon is on the left and the western horizon is on the right. So anti-clockwise and clockwise is really neither here nor there. The stars are going from east to west on both models. And the way it's been done is they seem to have flipped the map around. Okay, on the northern hemisphere you've got the North Pole or the North Celestial Pole in the middle. On the southern hemisphere you've got the perceived South Celestial Pole in the middle. Well, of course the stars are going to go in the opposite direction. You're looking in the opposite direction. But this is not some idle academic exercise. I live in the northern hemisphere. I live about 50 degrees north. So if I look south, I can see Orion in the winter months. And the thing you'll notice about Orion is it spans the equator. So I can see the top of Orion and I can see the bottom of Orion. Guess what? The stars on both are going in the same direction. They're going from east to west. So it might serve our purposes if we can get away from this clockwise, anti-clockwise thing, because clockwise and anti-clockwise are relative positions. I think we'll make life simpler for ourselves if we stick with east to west and kind of find our way from there. It might give us a better feel for what's happening up in the sky. So the glow-in-the-dark version had one redeeming feature, is it showed me the sky from the North Pole, or Polaris at the centre, all the way out to the 60-degree line. But that was really about as far as it went. So I went back to the original, this one. It's a much clearer map. It's not as bunched up in the information. You don't get everything trying to leap out at you at once. But some of you may recall me saying when I first got onto this that I have an annoying habit of wanting to know how things work. So here you go, a busted planisphere. For one reason and one reason only, I get to see the sky map that's underneath, and I get to see the whole sky map in one go. And in the same way that I busted open the northern hemisphere one, I did the same thing for the southern hemisphere. So I've now got two sky maps, one for the northern hemisphere, one for the southern hemisphere, showing me the whole sky as it's seen from different parts of the world. I don't want to get too bogged down in whether the sky above our heads is a dome or a disc or whatever shape that it is, other than to say that there appears to be a surface of some description up there to which the stars are attached or in which the stars are suspended. It's really neither here nor there. The fact is, there is a sky up there and there are stars in the sky. What it allowed me to do is it meant I could then take the Northern Hemisphere star map, and using all the stars from the Southern Hemisphere star map, I could plot the stars for that last 30 degrees around the edge. So I'd end up with a sky map that showed the whole sky in one go. And this is what it looks like. There's deliberately no labels on it, because I wanted to keep it as simple as possible. Around the edge, you got the months of the year that I'm not going to use at the moment. They'll be more useful later when I put the ground masks on, but I'll explain those in a little while. It's really simple enough that once you can recognise one or two constellations, you can start to find your way around the sky. Anybody in the Northern Hemisphere, the most common one you'll have heard of is probably this one. It's the Little Dipper. The Little Dipper is useful because it shows us where Polaris is, and this is Polaris right at the centre. Some of you may be familiar with the Big Dipper, which is kind of here. The Big Dipper is actually the back end of the Great Bear, and this is, I don't want to make this into an astronomy lesson, but if you have a glance around, you might recognise the shapes of one or two of the constellations. Stars are classified based on brightness, and they start at number 0, and the numbers go up while the dimness goes down. So generally the brightest stars in the sky were category 0 or category 0, and then category 1 was a little bit dimmer, category 2 was dimmer than that, category 3, and so on. But stars, they've been categorised in stars since the middle of the 16th century, and gradually, as different scales were put together for it, they suddenly realised there was one star in the sky that was even brighter than all the bright stars in the sky, and it's this one. It's Sirius, which is in the constellation of Canis Major. So they had to, rather than change the whole scale, they had to categorise Sirius as a -1 magnitude. Now, the only reason I'm talking about magnitudes of the stars here is because standard astronomical notation is the brighter the star, the bigger the blob. So as you look around this, you'll see that some stars are bigger than others. It's because they're brighter than others. And once you start to see where the bright stars are, it makes it a little bit easier to find your way around it. As I said, if you have a glance around, there are one or two constellations on there that you can probably recognise. A constellation is simply a bunch of stars joined together to make a picture. The one that makes people in the Northern Hemisphere probably recognise is this one. It's Orion, and you'll have seen this in mythology books, and you've seen it in kind of junior level Welcome to the Stars type books. He stands with his head to the north and his feet to the south. You've got his two shoulders, and you can see his arm above his head, although he hasn't actually got a head. And then you've got Rigel and Safe are the two stars that form his feet. And the thing that most people recognise is Orion's belt, which is these three stars. And underneath those three stars, hanging down below his belt, you've got three tiny little stars that represent his, well, that's not mentioned really. And the other constellation that we hear much ado about is this one up here. It's Crux. That's Crux. 4 stars. The brightest one's actually called Mimosa. That's what people in the southern hemisphere generally watch, and a lot of the legends are made up about the crossing the sky and settling in the winds and all that sort of stuff. We did a little bit about precession when we were talking about the sun and how it travels between the tropics, and then we also did when we did the moon as well. The stars precess in the same way. The constellations, I've divided them up. There are 88 constellations in the sky. The ones in green are the ones that are generally called the Northern Hemisphere constellations. You've got the blue ones, which are the zodiac signs. If you've watched anything of what I've done so far, you will have mentioned those a couple of times. The ones that are in yellow are the Southern Hemisphere constellations. And the ones in red are also Southern Hemisphere, but they're the ones that are on the last 30 degrees of the sky. So what it means is I've got a sky map now that shows the whole sky in one go. But you'll notice that the constellations around the edge seem to be a little bit bigger than those that are towards the middle. I can only hazard a guess at why they're like that. What it's effectively giving us is an AE map of the sky. And this map sits directly above the circular map of the world below. I don't want to get too bogged down in what the map of the ground looks like, because we can't quite decide that between us. But for now, what I've got now is a map that shows the sky, and I'll do the ground masks. You'll be able to see which parts of the sky you can see. If you go out and try and find a planisphere that covers the whole sky, it doesn't seem to exist. What you'll find is planispheres for different locations based on latitude, and the ground masks will show you how much of the sky you can see. Now, how much of the sky we can see is really based on our eyesight. The brighter the stars are, the further away they are that we can see them. But it actually provides a fairly small circle on the sky that you can see the stars and recognise constellations. Once I started looking at this and realised that the ground masks for the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere were completely different, and the available visibility seems to be grossly exaggerated for the Southern Hemisphere. What I did to go with this star map is I produced 3 ground masks. I've done one for 50 degrees north, I've done one for the equator, and I've done one for 35 degrees south. So I can lay any of the 3 ground masks over the sky, and it will show me which constellations I can see as the sky clicks on hour by hour. If you go out and look for planispheres, as I've said, they're hard to find, especially around the equator. I managed to find one made by a manufacturer called Rob Walrecht. I found it on Amazon that it claims to be an equatorial planisphere. It's notable for a couple of reasons. One, they had really bad feedback for their delivery, and it doesn't seem to have been resolved. But the only alternative that you'll find for an equatorial planisphere is there's one made for, it seems to be aimed at, it's a Spanish manufacturer, I think. And the way they've dealt with it is they've split the planisphere into what I effectively had with 2 separate discs. And the problem with doing it that way around is you have to look one direction for looking at the stars in the north, and you have to look in the opposite direction for the stars in the south. And this is where I think we might be getting caught out in terms of how big the constellations in the sky really are. The only way we can really make a comparison is to stand on the equator and to look at the Northern Hemisphere constellations and then the Southern Hemisphere constellations and get a match for what I've got here. I've seen a few photographs from a few people around the world that have taken photographs of the constellations, and they seem to be comparable to the sizes that I've got here. So I'm kind of hoping that when people have had a chance to look at this and get a feel for what's up in the sky, they can go out and actually take a look in the sky for themselves. I've built the prototype for this, and it seems to work. Because planispheres have the ground mask riveted to the sky map, it can be awkward when you want to start changing them and using them at different locations, and there seems to be an awful lot of money to be made out in the world by people selling you different ones based on different locations. As I've said, take a look on the internet, search planispheres and see just how many different manufacturers come up. I seem to have got this one to work. I did it with magnets and it works quite well. So I've got a few people testing at the moment, and once I'm satisfied that it works, what I want to do is I'm going to make it up in hard copy, and also make it up as an electronic planisphere, and people are then welcome to it, and you can go and you can play with it to your heart's content. You'll find your way around the sky, and more than anything, I think it'll just give us a better idea of what's going on up there. One of the things that's frequently thrown into the mix on all this is people say, well, the stars in the sky don't tell us anything about the earth on which we live. And as I've said before, I'd beg to differ on that. The stars in the sky have been used to navigate around the world for centuries. They're regular. We can take timing from them. We can take locations from them. And all we need to be able to do really is find our way around up there. And that's really what I aim to do with this. But I've done it as a bridging episode, really to give people a chance to think about things and to really deal with the one enduring question. So the only constellation that gives us any problems for the Southern Hemisphere is Sigma Octantis. So I wanted to just get a closer look at it for a moment. If you look on the sky map, there are 3 stars, 2 down at the bottom and 1 up towards the top. I've shown them in green just to make them stand out. They're not really green. They're actually quite dim stars. And these are the 3 stars that make up the constellation Sigma Octantis. But if we spin it back a little bit, Sigma Octantis, right, the constellation is called Octans, and it was discovered in the 1700s by a French astronomer called Nicolas Lecaille. And when he discovered it, he catalogued 4 stars. What history and astronomy and everything else was made of it after that, I don't know. But what you'll notice is the stars are too far apart to make a single constellation. All the other constellations on the map work, including the ones right around the edge. But Octans doesn't work. And the reason it gets used as a counter to flat Earth is people say, well, there's a South Celestial Pole, and everybody at the South Pole can see the South Celestial Pole, just like you can see Polaris. Well, I don't think they can. The furthest south anybody can go is 35 degrees, and you've seen the ground masks that I've made that work for this. I don't think people at 35 degrees south can see that far beyond the perceived South Pole. If they could, there'd be a problem, because anybody looking up and over the South Pole, the other side of the world, would be in daylight. You can only watch stars at night time. So if somebody on one side of the Earth is looking at part of Octans from one side of the world, they're not going to be able to see the other side of it. And I think Octans, and certainly as an explanation for why we live on a little ball flying through space, is largely a fiction. I can't speak to what people are seeing when they go out there and they look at it. At best, I would suggest that people can see 2 stars that are part of octans, and at any time there's always going to be at least one of them is not visible. So all these marvellously taken, colour corrected, high definition, time-lapse photographs and pictures that people put up to say, here we are, this proves the South Celestial Pole, I don't think they mean anything, because they don't give us any indication of what they're looking at. As far as I'm concerned, they are blurry photographs. If somebody wants to prove that there is a South Celestial Pole, they should be able to see those 3 stars all pulled together south of the South Pole. I think the only place that you'd be able to see this constellation spinning, if indeed it existed, would be for them to be down at the Antarctic, and I don't think anybody is going there anytime soon. So there you have it, a full map of the sky. As I said a moment ago, this is not an astronomy class. There's not a test at the end of it. And what you do with it is entirely up to you. I know the stars don't prove the Earth on which we live, or the shape of the Earth on which we live, but they certainly do allow us, and have allowed us for centuries, to navigate our way around. So at the beginning, this is a bridging episode. So what I'd really like to see now is people just have a look at this, see what they think, see if they can formulate some better questions for us to be asking the people who still think we live on a little ball flying through space. And after that, we can go from there. Thank you for listening.
Because only through Jesus are your sins washed off. And if you will not see him, then God will not see you. And whatever happens to your eternal soul, well, you always have the choice, and you cannot deny from this day forward you haven't heard these words either. In a very simplified way, that's what's happened. So, Satan, the father of lies, he's a tempter, because he tempted Eve, he tempted her. He's full of temptations. Oh, it's so this and it's so that. Come on. So he's tempting you now from again, the book of truth. He's took the book of truth and he's pulled a lot of stuff out of there and he's put it in a big pot and stirred it all up, and he's come up with other religions and ideas and lots of strange, wonderful things that me and Kim have joined in on a few occasions, you know, and actually talked about it with ourselves and said, why is my life worse than it was before? There's no salvation in any of that. So Satan will keep producing things that are going to tempt you away from God. And if you're not saved, it's like, oh, another one. And when somebody's going to get saved, he hates it and he's going to do anything he can to try and pull that person back. So he's only got temptations to tempt you away from God with. So be very discerning. And these other religions, they're all false. Nobody died for you. Nobody in those other religions shed their blood, washed your sins off and died because you're that important. The flat earth idea also brings about an importance and a significance that the spinning ball world doesn't bring about. You are so important. You are so significant. You see, you're created, because that's what the flat earth is going to bring you back to, that something created the earth for you to live on. Something created you. Find him. Find the God of the Bible, but do not pray to Yahweh once you've found the God of the Bible and thanking him for all his goodness. Only through his Son will he turn again and see you once more. Only through his Son. Jesus Christ is the Saviour. So there he is. Look, I have given you authority over all the power of the enemy, and you can walk among snakes and scorpions and crush them. Nothing will injure you. And we can also we'll do this later, we're going to put on the full armour of God. This is so that your spirit is protected in the heavenly realms, because whether you know this is happening or not, this is happening. This is recorded in the scriptures, and when you welcome Jesus Christ, the living God, into your life, not through any religious dogma or indoctrination like that, there is no ritual to follow. We don't have to be good like the Pharisees and the scribes of the day, walking around in our finery telling people how it should be and shouldn't be, and actually missing the point. Well, God's arrived. Hello? Oh no, that's not God. The law of Moses, it doesn't say that. Well, they couldn't recognize him when he showed up because they didn't want somebody taking away their authority, and they've given their authority to the enemy by doing that. So yeah, the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God, eternal life. You might not understand what eternal life means right now, and you might be quite happy in your life that you've got, but there will come a time when you take your last breath, and you'll still have a soul that's eternal. You might not know you've got an eternal soul. You might think that's it, but you won't know. You won't know till it happens. And what if it is too late then? What are you going to do then? But right now, you can call upon Jesus Christ, and you can welcome him into your heart, your life, your world, and watch and witness him yourself. And then you'll know, because that's the only way that you'll know. So I've explained this a little bit before. So the spirit serves God, the body serves the soul. The soul serves the spirit, the body serves the soul. So it's all intertwined. And since I've discovered this truth, I have to be discerning. And sometimes things are happening in my life, and people are put in there, or thoughts like, oh, where's that come from? But now I'm aware. Somebody really tried to stop me coming here today, through the week, making us ill and what have you, and things happen. It's like, no, I keep turning back to Jesus. I don't. At one time, we had a conversation earlier with someone about, well, if God is true, then, why are these bad things happening? Well, everybody wants to blame God for the good and the bad, when actually God is good and just, and he wants what's best for you. The enemy wants what's worse for you. And he has got some power over this earth as well to cause afflictions, addictions by, oh, go on, just have a sneaky one, nobody will know. Or, oh, yeah, go on, I'll just do that, nobody will see me. God sees everything. So, yeah, if you sin against God and you're on your little own, God's there with you. So it really makes you want to be a better person. You want to do your best, the best that you can in your life. It does alter and affect you from a heart point of view, and not just about doing good works either. Really feel that presence, and you are not God. That is an absolute insult from what we've discovered as well. But I'm willing to give the glory to God for every wonderful thing and every bad thing that ever happens in my life, because I know that I can always turn on God, Jesus. And he shows up and he sorts things out. He gave me a brand new life. He gave me a brand new partner and new friends and new things happening like this. Brand new life in a very short space of time. When I thought I was wretched and nobody, there was only God left to turn to, and God showed up. And that's just my own personal testimony, but there are people in this room who have got other testimonies like that to share as well. So be discerning about thoughts that you're having, or gut feelings, or like, be discerning about that and where it's coming from. And you can test the spirits. So if the spirit, I looked into this recently, like, how do you test the spirits? You ask that spirit or that thought, do you believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God? If it doesn't, it'll flee. So this is an overview of how these demons are working in the air and what they can do. They're assigned operations on your family generational line right back to the days of Adam. So, because the hierarchy of angels that fell with Lucifer, with Satan, we're already in some sort of strategic order, a bit like an army. So they kept their positions, and it's probably like a pyramid structure with like commanders and going down. So you'll have demons like the tormentors, illness demons, addiction, whatever it might be. How is it in some families, the great-grandfather was an alcoholic, and then a few generations down the line, such a body's an alcoholic. Oh, it's in our genes. No, it's not. It's a demonic spirit manipulating and controlling your generational family line. So knowing that, it's like when you go to a medium or a spiritualist, they will tell you, oh yeah, your grandpa hid the gold in such a place, you know, under the wardrobe with a silver key or whatever. Nobody else knew that, but the demons know everything, so they imitate your ancestors and they can use mediums because they're open to the satanic ways, and they give their will over to Satan, so they can come in and tell you what's happening, and you think it's your grandfather or your ancestor that's speaking through them. In actual fact, you know, you're being deceived. Again, it'll stop at nothing to stop you turning to God.
They can't read your mind, though.
Sorry?
They can't read your mind. They can observe you.
Well, they can't read your mind. They can't read your mind, but they can put thoughts in. You can't read your mind. He's got certain powers. He's not got the powers of God, but he has certain powers over this world. So here's a few things. They can talk, see, have memory, free will, feelings and emotions, including anger and fear. They seek to and fro on the earth and seek rest. Seek and accept worship. They have intelligence, know their time is short, recognise who the saved are, testify to the validity of Jesus Christ. They believe in one God. They're aware of the destiny, and they influence men through lies. Any lies. They're not bothered. They'll stop at nothing. So the flat earth, knowing, I do believe it's the biggest shift in consciousness is Jesus walked the earth. It is a calling card from God to get closer, because he's calling out for the people. He's calling out. And again, it's your free will. God's given it to you, and whatever you do with it is up to you. So there's a battle going on in the spirit, whether you know it or not. And there's some amazing testimonies out there which can prove this. But we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So angels are fighting for you in the air against the demons, fighting for your will, mind, and emotions. That's every breath that you're taking. These do not stop ever. They don't stop. They're not going to stop fighting for your soul. It's that important. It's that important to God. It's that important to the enemy. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And nothing shall get to the Father unless it's through me. And there it is. As fairy tale-like as it sounds, I've had some people saying to me, and it's actually, I actually thought to myself, of course it's true. It's so obvious. It's so obviously true because it's the only constant. It's always been there. And it's that in your face. They offer him right there, but then it's covered up with Sananda and the Christ consciousness and all these other fluffy things that they've put around it. So it's a Son of God, and it can save your soul. I really recommend that anybody that hasn't welcomed the living God into their life, that they seriously think about doing it. If you go through the flat earth idea and the flat earth truth, and it brings you there, knowing that you're created. Because a lot of people have gone to the Bible because of the flat earth truth, realised that there's a creator, and like I said, started praying to the creator, but you can't see it. The book's about Jesus. It always has been. The whole book is about Jesus. The whole of your life is about Jesus Christ. If you don't know that, you're missing out. You really are. Yeah, so be sober, be vigilant, because your adversaries
right around like a coast. But what we're saying is Antarctica is an ice.
Navigate on Antarctica.
Can you?
Yes.
Captain Cook did it, and he went 60,000 miles going around. He was supposed to be going around Antarctica. He ended up going 60,000 miles.
Mate, that's the North Pole. I'm talking from the other side.
But the way it really is,
you've lost your head, mate.
No, this is
like. Can we go back to evolution as well? So do you think we just came from like the sky like this, or how do you explain fossils? I mean,
well, I could explain all that.
Global warming?
Does that contradict the entire theory?
We cannot be certain.
It's climate change, and the climate changes all the time. So you say there's climate change, of course there is. It changes all the time. But
you just think it's possible?
No. Are you kidding me? There are volcanoes and such that will put up such sulfur and things in the atmosphere. Yeah, you can find it.
So using the argument of like the fact that the Earth's climate change, the Earth's climate has fluctuated in terms of average global temperature over years. Yeah, that's absolutely
it changes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, how would you explain like the rapid, not anything to do with what's happened, but rapid in the past sort of 50 years? That's not been repeated in history prior.
That's the hockey stick chart. That's where they only go back so far, and they're only telling you the temperature changes up until a certain point in time. But if you go back even further, you'll see that the Earth was a lot warmer going way back thousands of years. But they only like to...
When it was first formed, when it was like molten lava.
This is all theory. This is theory.
Molten lava?
Theory. It's called...
physical evidence?
It's called the Big Bang Theory.
Volcano.
Molten lava.
Have you never seen a volcano?
I'm sorry.
No, I think he was talking about the formation.
Mate, tell me about fossils. Go on, hit me up with evolution. So do you think we just came from the sky?
Do you think two rocks smashing into each other formed your circulatory system and all the complex fractal geometry in nature?
Millions of rocks.
Alright, so millions of rocks are hitting each other formed your circulatory system and digestive system and complex immune system.
No, I think that the rocks that came together due to the gravitational pull created the Earth, okay? And then primitive environment was high nitrogen, CO2, and hydrogen, nitrogen, CO2, and a little bit of oxygen. Yeah? Okay? You with me?
Yep.
Okay. So then they've been experiments, so they've created a vacuum with these elements in them, and they think about primitive energy sources. So at the origins of Earth, they had high levels of volcanic activity, so that indicates a high amount of temperature. So they heated up some of these. High amounts of static electricity, so thunder, etc. Lightning, I mean. Okay, so they're primitive source of energy, and they have these in these sort of sealed environments. And actually, with the input of energy and with those basic elements, then you can create basic amino acids. Okay, and then the idea that those basic amino acids, over time, one of them will find a way of replicating, and therefore be more abundant than the other basic amino acids. And over time, they evolve in complexity because the ones that can evolve will increase in proportion compared to all the other ones in the population. And then suddenly, say, start binding together, and they can continue evolving like that, and then you end up with the first single-cell organism, and then you continue that along there.
Thank God for rocks, right? Like doing it. I like how you said seal system, because how can you have a pressurized atmosphere right next to a vacuum without a seal?
No barrier?
No. You can't.
The Kármán line, 62 miles.
We have a vacuum of space.
Yes.
How do you have a pressurized atmosphere next to the vacuum of space?
Oh,
Gravity. So gravity, the amazing gravity, keeps the vacuum separated from the pressurized atmosphere. Gravity.
Without gravity, the gravity that you don't think exists. Wait, gravity doesn't exist.
No, that's called buoyancy.
That's density.
Density and buoyancy.
Dense things fall.
You're gonna drop something.
Buoyant things rise.
Right, watch this. Gravity doesn't exist.
Yes.
Fuck me, Simon.
Okay, take helium now. Take helium in a
call that
balloon.
magic. You call it gravity.
Yeah, take helium in a balloon. Now it's anti-gravity.
Cannabis trees disprove gravity. When I grow
Butterflies disprove gravity. So, hold on. We're talking about a gravitational force, right?
Is this like a comedy sketch? Do you want some money at the end of this?
No, we don't want your money. No, we don't want your money. So gravity
wait, you got a little.
keeps all the water at the bottom of the spinning ball.
Gravity is gravity.
But it can't keep a butterfly from flying up. Dude, how come it can't pull the clouds down? It cannot all that. It keeps strong enough to keep the moon
Have you ever seen rain? Have you ever seen rain? That's gravity pulling the clouds down.
It's more dense. It's more dense.
Hey everybody, the problem with gravity is gravity is the ball believer's Zeus.
And it's more dense than the
It's
gas
the
in the
answer for
atmosphere.
every religious position. Gravity. It's Zeus.
You guys
Your
can't
gravity
prove
is like
gravity.
Jesus.
It's magic. It's
You
magic.
fellas cannot prove gravity. Sorry, you can't do it.
I just did.
No, you proved density versus.
You just proved that a dense object fell through a medium in which is less dense.
It's heavier than the air around it, therefore it will sink down. Now, if you
take a
have
basketball and jump into
what about on the moon, where they dropped the lead
feather, yes.
Is gravity going to pull it down?
That's a very easy thing. You can duplicate the props department.
In the water. But so it's buoyant.
What's holding the water in the pool? What's holding the water in the pool?
It's more dense than the air around it, and therefore it sinks down. When you're swimming and you take a deep breath, you now become more buoyant, and you float a little bit. You exhale, you're messing with your buoyancy, and that's all it is. I grabbed 10 balloons, now I'm anti-gravity, that's it. That's all it took to beat gravity. But the...
What'd you get? What'd you get after trying to get rid of it? Why are you just like shitting everything?
Well, I've been into astronomy for 35 years, and then when I came across this, I tried to debunk it, and I couldn't, because the information that's out there is neutral. I wanted it to be a ball. I did, because I worked sci-fi for 35 years. I really love sci-fi. But the information says otherwise.
What's the information? What? You guys have
NASA's not showing us photography. Oh yeah, we got tons and tons.
Have you got, how many peer-reviewed papers have you got there showing me?
Well, I wouldn't say peer-reviewed, but it's scientifically reviewed. We have PhD guys with PhDs in physics. Curvature.
I'm sorry.
No,
vertical drop.
Yes.
So that's my top choice right now. I'm like a senior in high school, and I just like really want to get into. Do you have like any tips?
Yeah, don't be like him.
Well, I'm applying for classics, and I was thinking of applying to grades.
I've also got 40 days.
So what I'd look at is if you look at the tutors in all the colleges and look what their particular interests are within that subject, but in physics, so I know that shit about classics, and then I try and apply to a college.
Apply to, like, you can see all 27 numbers.
27th is the
Nose was like the most applied to college last year.
So don't do red nose. Yeah. Lady Margaret Hall, St. Peter's. Look at St. Peter's. St. Peter's is great. Lady Margaret Hall's great. But yes, so that and in combination with what the tutor's doing, so when you have an interview with them, you've got a good rapport, and that's often it's just what he's doing.
And be interested.
And actually, a big thing is, so I was talking to some people who go here, in the personal statement, like, I've heard that American colleges are very big on like charity stuff and stuff that you do in your free time. They don't give a shit about that. They only care about your extracurriculars that you've done that demonstrate an interest in your subject, that you've gone above and beyond to like read about your subject. So ask the competitions you've like entered or what experiences.
So the sun is not 93 million miles away.
Stuff like that. I mean, they like to know that you've done a little bit. Statement 80% about your subject and 20% about you as a person.
I'm sorry. Can we start from the beginning? Let's start from the beginning. Why is it not? Well, if you use the trigonometry.
Yeah, no, we do have it. I mean, it's not like. I don't know, but it's not like you get it.
There's no way this is dedicated to him.
But I mean, we have rugby, so you have time to do life on the side.
That has a hot spot on the earth.
Wait, go on.
Forget flat or blow. Because there's a hot spot right there. Okay. So if we send a balloon up, it's 100-something thousand feet, 18, 19, 20 miles in the air. Okay. And we've got footage of the sun right there. Yeah. So do you have any physical evidence that it is 93 million miles away?
So this bloke over there, I look at him and I look at my finger and he looks about the same size as my finger. Right. So does that mean he's the same size as my finger?
It's perspective.
Okay, so why, if we look at the sun...
But we were talking about the distance of the sun, not the size.
Why you think it's that far?
Yeah, so you're saying that
what experiments can you do to prove the sun is that far?
You can look at the speed of light.
Can you prove the speed of light?
Yes.
Okay.
You can.
So you would have to turn the sun off and then turn it on again to actually conclude anything. If you're going at the speed of light, the light was here before you were born. So how are you going to?
Here before I was born.
So how are you going to?
There's constantly new light.
So you have to turn it off and turn it on, and then say, okay, we just turned it on. This is when the light reaches us, but we can't turn the sun off to prove how fast the light's
going. We don't need to turn the light off.
You just believe what you're taught, right?
I mean, I look I like to think that I listen to what I'm taught, then I look at the proof, and then I say, what's your proof? Why do you think the sun is right there? What's the physical evidence, man? What's the physical evidence?
So you don't
look at the balloon. Look at the balloon.
Let me give you the physical evidence. The sun shrinks in size as it travels away. If it's 93 million miles away, it would never shrink. We would never see any shrinkage.
You walk.
How far?
To that car. Yeah. Okay, so you go to the car.
I thought it was people like on documentary.
Wait. Okay. So, okay, that's good. That's good. Stay there. Okay, so this is the balloon. This is the physical evidence we have. Your friend here is the sun, and that's my finger. So my physical evidence, you're saying that says, according to that physical evidence, he's the size of my finger.
That's where we were talking about the distance of the sun, not the size.
Okay, well, so how are you telling the distance from the picture?
I don't have evidence of the sun of the distance of the sun. I can't prove it's 40 miles away or it's 80. It's certainly not 93 million miles away.
Why is it not?
Because your own eyes show you it's right there.
So my eyes show me that you're the size of my finger. Fucking hell! Hey, you're not the size of my finger.
If I told you that person was 50 miles away, would you believe it?
I wouldn't know either way.
Well, you know,
there we go.
Sidewalk is him. Are you really 50 miles away?
I don't know. You could, I would say,
but if I just told you, hey, that guy is 50 miles away, why would you blindly believe me?
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't blindly believe
you. Go.
But I don't. There you go. I'm not blindly believing that the sun is 93.
You're blindly believing it's 93 million miles.
There's a multitude of peer-reviewed papers.
Okay, I trust my scientific observation, my scientific.
That's absolutely fine. But if you take one person,
there's also
there's also majority, if not the entirety of the scientific community.
In your knowledge of history, has the majority been right or wrong? Wrong. They've always been wrong. You always get one jerk off who comes around and advances society because everybody believes something else. So we say now it's like this. Okay, now they believe that. Well, now it's like this.
You're the grad student, or you're the attendee of this great university, right? So let me ask you, if I live on a globe that's 24,900 miles in circumference, what's the rate of curvature from every distance that I look? Come on, you got the math, and the money to go to these schools. My kid can figure this out. What is the rate of curvature on the globe?
Tell me, what's the rate of curvature?
Well, what's the radius of the Earth?
I don't know.
What's the circumference of the Earth?
I don't know.
Okay, so if they don't know these basic points, how can they argue with us?
It is pretty fundamental, the circumference of the Earth's size, because the curvature is uniform on a ball. It's uniform. So we'll go to the oceans with these cameras that are like telescopes, and we can see islands and lighthouses 10, 20, 30 miles away. That's impossible on their math. It's their math. It's not our math.
Using the fake numbers.
I still want to know why you don't believe in evolution.
I used to. I used to.
Why don't you?
When I came across this changes everything. This really does. Because that means we're created now.
What have you got against evolution?
The creation of, if it's flat, it was created. You see what I'm saying? Like, this is the difference between the ball and the flat. The flat, when you realize it's flat, oh, that means it really was created. That means we really do have it created.
You're just going to completely regardless of whether it's created or not, is there not the possibility that the creator created some organisms that have evolved into something else?
Well, the only one that I know of is, say, the caterpillar and the butterfly. That's kind of an evolutionary jump to another.
It's metamorphosis, and actually a caterpillar's got the same exact genetic information as the butterfly does.
But it's like a physical change. It's like an evolutionary jump, like they're crawling, now they fly.
No, it's not evolution.
Because I've never seen it. There's no proof.
There is.
We have a missing link.
There's nothing you can show me or demonstrate.
He's talking about E. coli
evolution project.
E. coli.
I guess I'll have to look into that then. How does that prove?
So it's a gentleman that for 30 years has been altering the conditions in which he is growing E. coli and creating different selection pressures, and then it's certain intersections, so every single day it takes a sample of it, stores it and freezes it. And so by altering the selection conditions, therefore altering which E. coli are more biologically fit in proportion in relation to all the others that are in that environment, he changes their proportion within the population, and therefore you can map that throughout the 30 years that he's been doing it. You can see that actually they've got different characteristics as you go throughout the 30 years.
So what does he have now? Yeah, he has E. coli now. So we started with E. coli, and now he has E. coli.
He's got different E. coli.
So it has it changed from one kind to another? It's still E. coli. Has it changed from one kind to another? Because that's what evolution depends on. You have to be able to get differentiation of species. You have to be able to get new genetic information for evolution to work. We've never seen spontaneous generation. We've never seen these differences actually occur. We've never seen a fly become anything. We've never seen a fly turn into a non-fly. We've never seen an owl give birth to a non-owl. These kinds continue to reproduce after themselves. You're right, and it's never been proven to happen. So until there's any kind of proof that there's actual proof, and then why are you not able to tell me that there's like an example of E. coli changing into something else? You just told me E. coli turned into E. coli. That's not a change of kind. That's not evolution. That is not evolution.
Yeah, you made to walk off.
That's not evolution.
Well, just keep in mind, like, you should be seeing a curvature drop. Look for it from now on. When you're in a plane, when you're on a mountain.
Have you ever been on a boat in the open ocean? What's the first thing you see with a sailing boat?
I see a flat, straight everything.
You see the mast that comes up first and the rest of the boat.
Well, that's called, yes, that's the convergence. That's the vanishing point of our vision. Does the sky...
Why would you see the top first instead of it coming down?
Well, that's just how... All right, I'll tell you this. When you're on a boat, when you're looking in the distance, does the sky touch the water? But is the sky touching the water? No. They're parallel. But they look like they're touching. That's a convergence point at the vanishing point of the horizon.
But your conversion point, by that, the logic of that argument, you'd actually see a miniature of the boat arriving perfectly formed, growing bigger and bigger. Not by the logic of your argument. But actually, that's not what happens. And when the sailing boat comes over the horizon, you see the top of the mast, followed by the bottom of the mast, followed by...
Yes, I agree with you. But right at that water level is the most dense part of the atmosphere, which creates a miraging effect, which is why you see the mast first. The rest of it, they'll even tell you on the news, your visibility is only 5 to 10 miles.
You're looking
horizontally through the atmosphere.
Your eyes can see, that's where your eyes can see. But if you zoom in, you see it.
Check us out on Facebook and YouTube. There's some nice blokes from Oxford. Some very smart chaps. At least they think they are.
Anybody that has any soul.
Oh yeah, right. It is. It's valid point. It's not anything to be laughed at. That's awesome. They have the hardest time. All of this money they spend for their degrees, you absolutely can't. They cannot believe that that what they have been taught is false. Those people were from Oxford University, and you know the guy just got killed in it. Hey, brother Nathan, come see us, my friend. Harvard, MIT, now Oxford.
We got him, man. We got him. Let's take them all on at once.
If you did like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. If you haven't subscribed, hit the red subscribe button. Also click on the little bell icon to get notifications of my Flat Earth videos, which I upload every day.
saliva